Thank you, Rob. Indeed, I'll call our committee of the whole meeting this morning to order. Is there any declaration of any interest related to any item on today's agenda? Not seeing one. Of course, you can declare it at any time if something arises. Business arising from the minutes. Councillor McQueen, you have a notice of motion. I'll ask first if you're prepared to move that motion. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Nielsen, thank you very much. Councillor McQueen, do you want to speak towards your motion, please?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. And as you probably all are experiencing through your budget process, insurance is up. Our municipal insurance. I know that ours was up like 186,000 this year. And I know there's a lot of things that come into play, but it never seems to ever go down. So the idea of this motion, and I will read it, that staff prepare a report for the Joint Municipal Service Committee regarding potential efficiencies and cost savings for Grey County municipalities as it relates to municipal insurance, including options for shared and joint RFP processes. And I understand, I think the county is looking at going out this year, and I just got thinking that why not, if there's an opportunity for other municipalities to collectively go together, and maybe it's all depends on your cycles of, usually insurance is once a year, but maybe you're happy with who you have, but sometimes, you got to go out there and sharpen the pencil and see what comes back. And so it's an opportunity for that committee maybe to look at, the opportunity to coming back and maybe pull some of the lower tiers and stuff. But we can't not try to save money. And if it's something that we can all be part of, then I think there's only 4 municipal insurers that do municipal insurance. So, there is a small pool there, no doubt. But you know what? If you don't know, you don't know what you don't know if you don't go out. So anyway, that's my motion, Mr. Deputy Warden.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone have any questions or any discussion on the motion? Okay. Oh, Randy, you want to talk to
that? Thank you, Deputy Warden, and thank you for the notice of motion, Councillor McQueen. With respect to the motion, we are still having internal discussions on what we're planning to do as it relates to the county insurance policy and our current brokers that we have. So based on some initial thoughts, it may not be this year that we go out, but maybe the following year. So we're still having some of those discussions internally to make just determine what makes the most sense from a timing perspective. So just wanted to note that as part of this, any further discussions as it relates to this particular motion. Of course, staff will take direction from council in terms of if there's information that you'd want us to bring back through the Joint Missile Service Committee. We have done some initial research and we're not sure if there would be any cost savings or efficiencies gained. But in saying that, we're happy to explore that further if County Council wishes staff to look at that. From a timing perspective, we're not sure when we'd be able to bring that report forward, but we'll try to do our best if council directs staff to do so.
Thank you, Randy. Anyone have any thoughts? Councillor Eccles, please.
Through you to Councillor McQueen. What are your expectations, or what are you looking to gain from this? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden, to Councillor Eccles. Volume. If you go out individually, and we've done this with other parts of our business with the municipality and county, like road paving and all different things. So my thought is if it hits your right cycle with your lower tier, then if the lower municipality is going out for an RFP, but I think if there's 2 or 3 or 9 plus the county, I think there'd be a bit of a volume that at least I think those insurance companies would go, we're looking for a report. I don't have all the details or all the information there, but I'm just thinking that if there's an opportunity to save on insurance through bulk processing, why wouldn't we try that? We've done it in other parts of our business. And at the end of the day, you don't know if you don't try, but I just think that our municipality hasn't gone out for quite a long time. And because, you're sort of probably with insurance, you're probably caught up with different things within your provider and stuff like that. But I think at some point, same with auditing, same with a lot of different things. I think it comes to a certain point where you need to go out just to see. And I've heard the things, yeah, they'll come back with a sharper pencil and it's a sharper, better price. And then they keep tacking it on as you go through. And I've heard those things as well. But I know from our municipality, we've been with the same company for quite a long time, and not saying that they're not doing us a good job, but I just know, our insurance went up 186,000 this year. That's 2%. And I'm not sure how, I'm sure it's not similar to other municipalities because insurance keeps going up too. But I know we have tough budgets and that type of thing. So it's the volume part that I'm thinking of, Councillor Echols, that if we jointly, those that wish to be part of an RFP, and maybe it's not this coming year, but it's the following year, but I think it's something that we all have to start thinking about. And if it's, if it works to line things up, then I think it's something that, we should investigate.
Okay. Councillor DeBreen, please.
Thank you, Deputy Warden, and thank you for the motion. While I'm not unsupportive of getting information and looking for opportunities to save our municipalities, expenses that are out of our control, where we have no say in how much we spend, ours in Southgate was 11% and 30 and 35% in previous years, because it depends on the incidents, the claims. You have a fire, you have, a garbage truck catches fire, or an arena catches fire in your, next year, look out. But the aspect of having group insurance, if that is what comes back, is that we'd also be bearing the increase of another municipality's incidences. So if a municipality has a lot more facilities and higher level of service and vehicles and all of that, they would necessarily be paying more than a municipality that is smaller, who has less service, like less population. So while I'm not unsupportive of getting information, we need to have the information that, it's all well and good to save money up front, but who bears the cost of the increase when it's one municipality's occurrence? I'm not sure where that lands, but that would be up to the report to flush out. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor McQueen, and let's just bear in mind, we're not debating insurance costs. We're debating, do we want to get more information? Councillor McQueen, please.
There we go. Yeah, that's what it'd come back in that report. In my mind, it wouldn't be one insurance policy that would do all the municipalities. I'm looking at that we jointly go each individually, but in a block. So that's where my thinking is. Like, yeah, but when it comes to losses and stuff, it's hard to calculate that in a sense of you got some bad years and maybe you don't want to go out because you're locked in at this price. But I think it's worth having a report come back and look at those options. But in my mind, it wasn't one insurance policy that does all of Grey Highlands and all the lower tier. It would be individually, but going together at the same time. It's sort of like it could be like Owen Sound getting 6 trucks. Didn't get they're talking over there anyway. But you know what I mean? Like it's sort of it's volume buying in a way, but you're individually. That's sort of my thinking. But that's something that has to be investigated. And like I say, you don't know if you don't look at it, right? So
Very good. Anyone else? You want to have a go at your trucks? No? Good. Excellent. Councillor Deckard, please.
Thank you. Just wondering, I did have a chance to talk with our CAO briefly on it, and her concern was, and it's been mentioned by Councillor Green, the number of differences between the municipalities and the mitigating actions that have already been taken by each municipality as to try and cut back on some of those costs. So I guess my question is to CAO Schertzer, will you be going out to the CAOs to see whether there's interest on each part of those municipalities Or I think we did it 2 years ago, went out and had an RFP done, and there was 2 people that bid on it. That was all that there was. It seemed to be almost a lack of interest. So while she did indicate there's might be some benefits to how that RFP is created, there's really a lot of individual needs and requirements across the 9 municipalities. So I guess my question is, would you be going to the CAOs first before moving ahead with that?
Through you, Deputy Warden, thank you for the question, Councilor Dicker. So I think, depending on obviously the direction from council with respect to this current motion, there no doubt had to be discussions with CAOs and each of the municipalities with respect to what this potentially could look like, from it sounds like a bulk buying RFP perspective. So for sure, we would be having further discussions with the COs to see what, if they felt there was any potential for savings and opportunities to work together with respect to that piece. So, but again, that's subject to the direction of council, whether or not they want to proceed with staff bringing forward that report.
Thank you, Randy. Councillor Hope, please. There you go.
All right, thank you. Good morning, and thank you, Deputy Warden. And thank you for the notice of motion. Just wondering about the second part, including options for shared and joint RFP processes. We haven't talked about that, and I'm just wondering where that is right now in terms of the motion itself. Thank you.
Councillor McQueen.
Well, I guess that would be part of what would come back in the report of what options are there for. And I think from a point of a Hanover, if they didn't want to be part of it, then you wouldn't be part of it, right? I think it's really important that through this report, RCO talk to our CAOs and have a bit of a conversation. Is there an opportunity? Is there some opportunity for savings? I think we got to look back too is deductibles. You know, what's deductibles? Like, you know, you always keep adding up your deductibles and it keeps driving your insurance down or keeps it at a level, but you end up having to have a separate reserve for your deductibles because, you know, that sort of thing. So again, shared or RFP processes, I'm looking more to the joint RFP processes in the sense that, you know, individually, but again, you won't know until you, and again, you're right, Deputy Warden, this is just getting back a report. We're not debating on it. It's bringing back that information because I don't have all the information. And I know I'm not, but I know I do see it going up and I know we're, you know, and we haven't had it for quite a long time, but we used to have also our insurance companies come and speak to our councils about the due diligence and how do we save on risk. And, you know, there's could be a part of that is educating and training as well. Part of this RFP going out, or is there, you know, maybe they look at, you know, through that process, you know, they come back with here's a better price, but we suggest you do this, this, and this. Well, maybe sometimes doing this, and this saves you money too. And we do not want to be in any situation where, you know, we're increasing our liability. But due diligence, keeping records, and probably a lot of us know that around the horseshoe that, you know, there's that 1% rule, right? We all know that, right? If you're 1% wrong, fault, and there's nobody else can pay, guess who pays, right? But it's the due diligence that protects yourself, and so that, you know, I think insurance has got very, very not complicated, but very sophisticated, I think, in a way. So it's just seeking a report, Mr. Deputy Warden, and you know, at the end of the day, the report comes back, and it's at least we've had that opportunity to go out and look at options.
Okay. I think it's fair to Councillor DeBreen. Go ahead.
Thank you. And not to debate it, I think to Member Hope's question, I'm hoping that I just wanted clarity that this is shared and joint RFP process specific to municipal insurance, because we already do joint RFP processes for our mutual road construction. And we also have the opportunity to participate in Canoe, which is, you know, that grouped RFP process. So I just want to make sure that we're voting on that this is specific to municipal insurance and not any other joint or shared RFP process. Thank you, Deputy Warden.
Thank you. I think it's fairly clear that it's just for insurance. Any other discussion? Councillor Eccles.
Where is this going? In to be looked at? We passed this motion that we're gonna, what staff, or should, I'd like to put forward a recommendation that this be forwarded to the Joint Services Committee. Is that what it is? Well, from the conversation, it was the CEOs that were going to do it. There was this, there was that. That's what it says in there, but yes, going around. Just for clarity, it's going to the Joint Services Committee for a report to come back. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we do have a delegation here this morning, and it's related to the municipal transit report that's on our agenda to come later. So I'm wondering if with council's indulgence, we'll do the consent agenda first, and then we'll have Stephanie introduce her report and introduce our delegation. The presentation would be done, and then Stephanie would follow up with her any discussion or questions from her report. Is that agreeable to council? I think it makes sense to do it that way. Okay, I see some nodding heads. So number 5 on the agenda, determination of items requiring separate discussion. Does anyone wish any consent items removed for further discussion or direction? Councillor Hope. Hope.
6C, Blue Water District School Board. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'd take a motion to adopt the remaining items in the consent. Councillor Keaveney, Councillor Hutchison, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. So moving on to 7A, our first item for direction and discussion. And this is the transit study update that has been ongoing. So I'll look for a motion to receive the report. Councillor DeBreen, seconded by Councillor Carlton. I will invite Stephanie to come on up to the podium. Good morning, Stephanie. Welcome. And the floor is yours.
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, County Council. Thank you so much for having me here today. Following our September report on the Ontario Transit Investment Fund, which approves signing the provincial funding agreement and giving us permission to begin phase 1 of the study, the purpose of this report and presentation is to share early findings from the regional transit study and provide council an opportunity for input to help inform and shape the next steps of phase 1. Today, Dennis Carr from Dillon Consulting will summarize what has been learned through our engagement today, preliminary service concepts and network design principles, opportunity for integration with existing services, early considerations and options for governance models, and key elements that will shape the recommended plan. Your feedback today at this stage is important to ensure the study reflects local priorities and operational realities. The draft plan will be presented back to each county council and the SMART board in May of 2026. So thank you for your time today. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Dennis Carr.
Welcome, sir. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Worship, and members of County Council, and thank you for the introduction, Stephanie. Stephanie noted, my name is Dennis Carr. I'm a project manager for this assignment, and we've been working together with all 4 counties, along with Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit Services, for the past few months, looking at the opportunity to develop a unified transit network within Grey, Bruce, Dufferin, and Wellington counties. So thank you again for having me here today. So I'll first begin with the study purpose, and I'm sure many of you are aware of the purpose of the study, but I just want to reiterate it. The purpose is to design and assess the feasibility of a unified transit network across all 4 counties. And this is being led through participation by Bruce, Dufferin, Grey, Wellington, along with SMART. So right now, this initial phase, which has received funding through the Ontario Transit investment fund is to assess that feasibility of what inter-community transit could look like and how to connect all 4 counties together, providing a sustainable mobility option for residents. As Stephanie mentioned, as we move forward, the next phase of the funding will be to start to look at getting OTIF funding to support operations of the funding program over a 4-year period. So why Unified Transit? And why are we doing this study? You know, many of you may have heard my presentation that I gave to various members of council across all 4 counties and the various municipalities about the challenges of implementing transit in large rural areas. We don't have that density to support that many urban systems have, but that need is still there. That need for mobility options, particularly those who don't have access to an automobile during inclement weather conditions, is still there. But recognizing that challenge, the unification of transit across these 4 counties will help it serve 3 purposes. The first is to create a seamless passenger experience. So understanding that challenge of, ensuring that we have enough ridership. If you're an auto driver and you cross a municipal boundary, you're not required to transfer when you're going to another, crossing a border. You're not required to pay another fare when you're crossing a border or wait. And so we want to make sure that there's that same seamless passenger experience, because people's travel patterns aren't necessarily limited to one county or one municipality. They cross these invisible boundaries quite regularly. So what does that look like in terms of trip booking, minimizing transfers, reducing wait time, or even creating a consistent eligibility for persons with disabilities to use specialized transit service? It can also help identify efficiencies through collaboration and taking advantage of unallocated resources. So things like reducing duplication of services, looking at shared procurement models that will help to save on resources, reducing administrative oversight of this shared service. So these are some of the things that we'll look at. And finally, it helps create that unified voice from senior levels towards senior levels of government to advocate for things such as improved service and funding. So 4 counties sort of working together creates that stronger voice than each county doing it individually. So in terms of our overall schedule, as I mentioned before, we began this project in October of 2025. And over the past few months, we've been really focusing on engagement and understanding the existing situation. What are the gaps in the service? What are the needs? What's the ridership potential? And we've been looking at different concepts and developing the plan. And that's why we were here today, is to present some of those concepts to you and to get your important feedback on what a unified transit service could look like. Once we get that feedback, we're going to be back to it, refining some of these concepts, developing preliminary recommendations, and going back to engagement, then refining it through public feedback, and as Stephanie mentioned, presenting back to each of the county councils in the SMART board in May. So in terms of the goal of this session, it's really to get your input. We're asking for any decisions here today. We just really want to get your feedback. And I'm going to present a couple of areas where we particularly want to focus on. Not to ask at least now, but I'll repeat these questions as we get to the end of the presentation. The first is, what are your thoughts on some of the preliminary transit options that we had identified? Do the concepts make sense? Do you see what do you think about the participation of SMART? Do you support those partnership opportunities that we're presenting to you? What are your priorities to focus on if funding is limited? So these are, again, different questions we want to ask. Is there priority to focus on corridors where we have the highest ridership potential, or focus on getting more equitable level of service, recognizing we may get less ridership if we spread out throughout the entire county, right? So those are decisions that need to be made. What about governance models? We've done a very preliminary review of some governance models. Do you have any feedback on sort of how you see this being structured? And then finally, what are key measures of success that should be in place to mitigate risks? And eventually the end of the OTIF program in 4 years' time. So, many of you may have seen this slide before. When we took a quick look at the existing landscape, we understand that mobility options are limited. There's local transit services in place, but they're fairly limited to Owen Sound, Blue Mountains, the town of Blue Mountains and Orangeville, as well as the city of Guelph, which is within or in and around Wellington County. There's a few intercommunity corridors that connect municipalities, but again, fairly limited. Two are operated publicly. One is the FlixBus, that's a private sector corridor. It operates on between Collingwood and Owen Sound. Specialized transit is in place. Each of the local municipalities have their own specialized service. Soggy Mobility provides specialized transit as well. And there's a number of community agencies as well that provide services primarily focused on medical day programs and some social rides. Bruce County has carpooling and there's also, again, several private carriers in place. But even with these services, again, serving such a broad area, there's still mobility gaps in place. As I mentioned before, there's no local transit service outside of Owen Sound and Blue Mountains within Grey County. So if you need to make trips locally within the municipality that you live in, it's very difficult to do so. For the intercommunity services that are in place, they have what's called the corridor effect, which means, we operate along the Highway 6 and the Highway 26 corridors, connecting as many of the settlement areas as we can. But really, some of that is limited to the ability to get to that stop, right? And you can get to it by relying on friends, neighbors, or walking. But again, that walking catchment area can be quite limited as well. And then intercommunity carriers such as FlixBus provide some level of service, but it's limited and a higher cost for everyday use. Finally, with regards to specialized transit, it's provided within Owen Sound, Meaford, and the Blue Mountains. And again, rurally in the rest of the county, it's provided by SMART, but it excludes certain municipalities who are not contributors to the SMART program, including the Blue Mountains, which has a larger service area than what's covered within their specialized service agreement. Owen Sound, which has its own specialized service, and Georgian Bluffs. And the other one is the HCSS of Grey and Bruce, which again primarily focuses on medical and adult day programs, and they're experiencing significant capacity issues, and as a result, they're limiting the amount of rides that they can provide to residents because of that capacity constraint. So I'll present these very, very quickly. We did a similar gap analysis for each of the other counties as well. So I'll go through these very quickly. Similar within Dufferin, local transit is only limited to the town of Orangeville. We've got that one corridor that provides limited service to Shelburne, and Dundalk, and specialized transit provided by Community Care. Within Bruce, there's no local transit service. And so we have a seasonal FlixBus service that comes in, and again, specialized transit provided by SMART and HCSS with some of the similar gaps and constraints that I identified before. And then finally, in Wellington County, which is a little bit different, they have the RideWell service, which is a door-to-door on-demand service that provides coverage across the entire county. One of the challenges with that, although the service is available, as you can imagine, there's about 5 vehicles that service that entire county, and the ability to book a ride when you need it is limited because of that large geography those vehicles have to provide. So it provides that equity and coverage, but can be challenging. And of course, again, pointing to that desire for a unified network, we have the GHOST service that runs up and down the Highway 6 corridor, the Guelph Owen Sound service, but it only operates a couple of times a day, and there's no integration with RideWell. So that ability to integrate and connect to this longer regional service is that gap and barrier. And again, one of the things that we want to look at when we're looking at unified transit is how do we sort of leverage the two and make them work together. So in terms of, that's sort of where we're sitting with our overall gaps. In terms of engagement, we were very active in our engagement process. We reached out to members of the community. We reached out to members of council. We held a number of different focus groups and held a number of different stakeholder meetings. So you can see here a summary of those engagement activities, which included 2 counselor sessions where we talked about transit, and we had about 100 and just over 100 counselors participate in those sessions. So good to see that level of interest and engagement. We had a community survey out with over 3,700 responses across all 4 counties, and I'll get to that in a little bit. We put out an employer survey as well, and we met with we held a couple of focus groups focused on key themes: employment, seniors, social services, youth, meeting with the Amish and Indigenous communities. So number of key themes that we covered, and of course met with a number of different service providers, key stakeholders, where we can get information on the existing services that are in place and how we better integrate. So lots of discussion that was being held. In terms of the community survey, as I mentioned before, just under 3,800 responses, so very good response rate, and pretty well distributed across all 4 counties, which about 36% of those responses that took place from Grey County residents. We took a look at who was responding to them, but not just transit users. In fact, 67% of respondents own or lease their own vehicle. It's a wide range of employment status, a wide range of incomes as well. So it was a fairly broad representation of the community who responded. And what did we hear? We heard things like, what are your top priorities for transit? So reliability and frequency, that vehicle is available when I need it. Those seamless connections to other transit systems, including the GO network, was identified as important. Improved coverage to all residents, so not just limited to those that live along those corridors. Easy trip planning tools, right? So I understand how to make connections between different systems, and seamless connections to local transit and lower fares. We asked how often you would use that network, so we can see some weekly use, some bi-weekly, but also there's a lot of use of people that need it for social trips, for grocery shopping, for medical appointments, right? There's a work component and a school component, but also a discretionary component that comes with transit, particularly if you live in a 2 or 1 car household and one member of that household has access to the vehicles and others do not. Or if you want to age in place and you need access to your community, but you don't necessarily have the means to drive a vehicle. And in terms of purpose, accessing the GO network, social, recreational, shopping errands, medical appointments, work, there's a wide range of different uses that was identified through the survey. In terms of the focus group, we heard a number of key themes: the importance of ensuring that the network created was accessible for all ages and all abilities as well. Promoting economic development, using transit as a tool to connect residents to places of employment and sometimes even attracting industry as well. Having that regional connectivity, recognizing that not everybody lives and works in the same community. Supporting health and well-being, access to medical appointments, doctor's appointments, hospital visits, etc., and the ability to age within your home. Integration, it was a key theme that was identified in terms of making sure those systems are seamless and operate well. And even, how does transit promote tourism? How do we, so we've got a FlixBus or some other buses that bring people in. Well, then am I stuck to one location, or can I better explore the region as well? So lots of things that we heard through the focus groups. So understanding that review of gaps, we started to take a look at what are some potential options. So when we first do our transit plan, we first look at what are the key destinations that we want to connect to, right? So we identified both primary and secondary destinations. And primary are really defined as those systems that are those municipalities or communities that are larger and have lots of amenities, employment opportunities, but also have a way to get around once you get dropped off. So these are primarily systems that have those local transit services in place. And then secondary destinations are really those hubs that are within each county, right? Where you know, I might live in a community that doesn't have access to affordable grocery shopping, that doesn't have access to medical appointments. So I'm constantly going to my neighboring community to get access to those services, to look for those employment opportunities. So those are identified as those secondary destinations. We also looked at, you know, commuters and where commuters are going. And this is strictly from the census data and identified, you know, where are the sort of those large commuting patterns. And this obviously doesn't represent everything. We have to sort of take a cutoff to identify what are the primary commuting patterns. But obviously, without any surprise, Owen Sound is that sort of that key destination within the county, including residents from Meaford and Chatsworth going in. Hanover is another key destination as well from residents of Durham. And you can see here what are some of those other commuting patterns that are available. We then looked at what are the major origin destination pairs, right? So, and typically these are, you know, where people are commuting and going to access even discretionary trips, you know, within that, you know, half hour to 40-minute travel time to that to one of those primary or secondary destinations. So basically, where are people drawn to, right? Because that's where we want to make sure that connectivity is in place. So this was based on, you know, combining what we heard from our survey, our discussions with stakeholders, our discussions with staff, understanding from the community, and that census data as well. And within Grey County, once again, Owen Sound continues to be one of those hubs for Meaford. Blue Mountain, the town of Blue Mountains is drawn into Collingwood and vice versa. There's many Collingwood residents that are going to the town to access employment opportunities with a number of the resorts. Markdale, Dundalk also have that sort of draw into Owen Sound. But then we start to see draws into other counties as well. You know, and cross draws as well. So, you know, we see Dundalk and sort of that draw to Orangeville, and not just to Orangeville, but also access the GO network in the Greater Toronto area as well. That Hanover being that hub between Walkerton and Durham, sort of that their destinations are primarily drawn to Hanover as well. And again, the GTA and 2 points of access via Guelph, where you have access to the GO train network, which can get you to Kitchener, Waterloo, as well as the Greater Toronto area as well. So those are sort of the key draws that we sort of identified. And again, going through the same exercises for each of the 4 counties. I won't get into this in a lot of detail, but what we do see is, you know, from Bruce, there is that draw into both Owen Sound and Hanover as well, right? So a lot of residents of Bruce are drawn to those for employment opportunities, medical, social, shopping, etc. So we can see that through our survey. And then Dufferin primarily drawn to the south with access to the Greater Toronto area and a little bit to the east into Simcoe County, and Wellington, you know, a little bit into Listowel. Obviously, Guelph becomes a big draw in the Greater Toronto area. A bit of a draw from Erin to Orangeville, and again that GTA network in Kitchener-Waterloo. So you can see here, you know, sort of how we assess the overall travel patterns, and really part of this then is about connecting those dots, right, and identifying what are those major travel patterns that we want to provide a stable, reliable service to. So as we go through this process, one of the first things we wanted to do is establish a vision and guiding principles, because, and this is gained through a review of county, you know, municipal policy, our discussions with various members of the community through the engagement process as well. And this sort of sets the umbrella of what transit service is going to look like. So our vision that we identified is connecting communities, building a better future through a seamless multimodal transit network. And that multimodal part is important because one of the things that we want to do is leverage some of the existing opportunities in place. Why recreate the wheel, particularly when funding can be limited. And so, you know, how we do this, these are our goals. We want to ensure that the service we provide is equitable, accessible, and affordable. We want it to be customer driven. So to track ridership, we must think about the customer as well. Is it seamless? Is it connected? Is it easy to use? We want to make sure that it supports growth and economic development. So it's been thinking about where growth is occurring in each of the counties and making sure we support that growth through a connected service. We want to be innovative and forward thinking, not just thinking about traditional transit opportunities, but this needs to be a sort of made in Gray, made in Wellington, Bruce and Dufferin solution, and fiscally responsible, because ultimately that OTIF funding will end and we want to make sure it's sustainable moving forward. So the opportunities that we identified to sort of achieve that vision, there are 4: looking at intercommunity transit, integration with SMART, integration with private sector mobility options, and integration with local transit, GO Transit, and community care. And I'll get into these in a little bit more detail. So the first part is looking at what are some of these conceptual corridors going to look like. And again, these are just right now concepts on a map. These are not recommendations at this point in time, but this is where we had identified, based on where those key origins and destinations are and where people want to go, what are some logical pairings that we want to look into and explore further and assess that overall demand. So these are intercommunity corridors that will have limited stops, connecting communities. The full service design principles, they should operate at least 3 to 4 times a day, right? Because that provides you with the mobility options, right? So if you're traveling, if you have a service that's only running twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, if you want to go somewhere for a discretionary trip, you're stuck in that community for 8 hours and it may not fit your schedule. So transit is also about ensuring that schedule is maintained. Looking at Saturday service as is being considered, particularly to support visitors and discretionary trips. Looking at more focused commuter routes for those short distance trips. So this is where we may introduce sort of higher levels of frequency because there's that stronger commuter demand. And again, that seamless travel between the counties. So again, these are just options that we had identified. So looking into some of these in more detail, the first one is looking at the GHOST corridor. And this is a service that currently operates through Owen Sound, through the old community transportation grant, and it operates twice a day. So one of the options we're looking at is the ridership is fairly good on this corridor. One of the challenges is it's not integrated with some of the on-demand services. And does it need to operate more frequently just to add more mobility options if you don't need to travel at those specific times where the GHOST operates? So something that we are exploring. Looking at, once again, extending the GTR service that starts in Dundalk and goes to Orangeville, but extending it north into Owen Sound and connecting to a number of the settlement areas within Grey County as well. Again, what's the right frequency of that service? It's not going to operate as frequently as that current service operates. But we can also look at an opportunity to supplement something within that Shelburne to Orangeville where that large commuter traffic. And that's corridor number 3, that sort of integrated with that Shelburne-Orangeville connection. We're looking at what does that Kincardine to Owen Sound connection look like. This will primarily benefit Bruce County residents. But again, is that potential connection to Bruce Power, a major employer in that area, and connecting to a number of settlement areas within the community. And again, a shorter trip between Fergus, Laura, and Guelph, where it's just a large growing population in Wellington County, and what does that look like? Going through some of these other ones, number 6 is that Kincardine to Durham connection. And again, this is that east-west connection that primarily benefits that provides that connectivity into Hanover and connecting a number of these communities that don't have a lot of services, employment opportunities to opportunities within Hanover, and also providing a potential north-south connection along the Highway 6 corridor or that GHOST service. Wyerton into Owen Sound as well. Again, strong draw for Bruce County residents to come into Owen Sound to access services. So again, something that we'd be looking at. Providing sort of that east-west link between Owen Sound and Collingwood would be another one that we would look at. there's a current Flix bus that operates that service, but it's infrequent. And it's certainly nothing that we would want to duplicate. Like, so one of the things we want to look at is, and I'll identify this in one of our future slides, is, you know, how do we integrate with that service rather than duplicate it? Can we take advantage of any excess capacity so we don't have to provide it and provide that levels of connection? So we do know that there's sort of those strong connections between Meaford and Owen Sound. And again, same as the sort of east-west connection between the Blue Mountains, Thornbury, Meaford, and Collingwood as well. So is there that opportunity to look at that east-west connection as well? And then finally, a short connection between Lucknow and Carden, primarily servicing the Amish community who, based on our discussions, there's that sort of that strong desire to connect to other parts of the region, including outside the region. Here, these ones are more focused on Wellington County, so I won't get into a lot of detail. What does that connection between Mount Forest and Listwell look like? Fergus Elora to Kitchener-Waterloo via Elmira and Guelph to Orangeville as well. So these are some of the other opportunities that sort of are more present in the southern parts of the county. The second set of recommendations look at a contract on-demand service to SMART. So as I mentioned at the beginning, SMART currently provides specialized transit. So is there that opportunity to open up that eligibility criteria? So we can have more of a commingled service. So we're not, you know, so if, you know, a SMART vehicle is picking up a passenger and that person is eligible for SMART, but if someone else requests the service that lives next door and they want to go to a similar location, we don't have to send two vehicles out. There's that opportunity to integrate and commingle. So some of the opportunities we explored are, can we expand SMART service into certain areas that are not currently serviced by SMART? You know, so in this case, it would be Georgian Bluffs and the town of Blue Mountains as well. We know that Meaford currently operates its own specialized service, and those are discussions that we still want to have. And there's that opportunity, if you're opening up that eligibility, to take advantage of the existing vehicle capacity with limited cost increase. So about, you know, 53% of total vehicle hours that are currently in place are spent what we call deadheading. You know, so going from, you know, I just dropped off a passenger, then I'm heading to my next pickup point. And because of the large area that's covered, you know, can we take advantage of some of that deadheading time if we start to introduce more trip requests, right? So very little sort of a limited cost increase in opening up that eligibility. Is there ability then to also convert some part-time drivers into full-time drivers if that demand grows? So we already have the vehicles. Some drivers are not operating, you know, that full 37.5 hours a week. Adding them to a sort of a full-time requirement allows us to take advantage of existing vehicles that are already in service and drivers that are already operating. And finally, can we utilize existing vehicles that are currently not in service? So there's some vehicles that SMART has in place that are not in service, with some maintenance and upgrades that we need to look at to see if they're roadworthy and viable. Can we add that to the market and again broaden the service area and increase the number of passenger trips? The next set of recommendations talks about integration with the private sector. So again, taking advantage of existing resources. A trip is a trip, right? We just want to provide mobility options to residents. It doesn't have to be on a public transit. We could have other options available. So this could, you know, start with opening up taxi and rideshare regulations across all 4 counties to encourage the expansion of taxi and transportation network companies. You know, can we have that sort of private sector integration? We want to explore an on-demand app that allows riders to utilize the private sector and community transportation providers to connect to intercommunity service as well. So can I take a taxi or ride sharing to connect to one of these intercommunity portals and potentially even provide a fare subsidy if I use one of these companies to connect to my intercommunity portals as an incentive to encourage that connection? and work with the private sector intercommunity carriers to make trips visible on a single app and consider those fare subsidies. So this is something that the Wellington County currently does on its RideWell app. It has Uber in certain parts of the county, and when you're booking a trip, you will see the RideWell trip, but you will also see Uber trips that are available. As a customer, you can have a choice. If your trip is not currently available and an Uber trip is, or a taxi trip or something else, then you can choose what mobility option you can have. So again, leveraging that and taking advantage. And finally, last set of options that we considered is integration with local transit, GO, and community care. So coordinating schedules with local systems at terminals. So those discussions need to take place to ensure those systems are integrated better. But better utilizing these on-demand services such as RideWell to connect to these intercommunity corridors. And so it acts as a sort of that first mile, last mile, if you're not within walking distance. But we don't want to use a on-demand trip for long distance trips. So we want to consolidate people on intercommunity corridors as much as possible. Explore potential integration with Meaford Moves, Specialized Transit in Owen Sound and the Blue Mountains. Make sure we have good connectivity to exterior systems such as Coltrans in Collingwood and Simcoe Links, which provides that connection into Barrie as well. Ensure all routes are visible on Google Maps and other trip planning tools to increase the ease of trip planning. Ensuring that connectivity to GO train and GO bus stops there, but providing those long layovers so we don't have control over GO. And sometimes those trips run late, or our trips can run late. So making sure that those connections are made and when we're doing our planning, and working with Metrolinx to participate in a one fare program, which is an upgrade to the Presto card, which allows for a discounted transfer onto the GO network. And this is something that Metrolinx is currently working on, not something that's going to be available here for the next little bit, but they're looking to expand the program. So that might be later on within the 4-year sort of OTIF application. So in terms of the summary, of the opportunities that we're exploring, looking at that spine network across those high demand corridors, connecting to those settlement areas, ensuring that we have, expanded SMART in some of those unserviced areas to connect to these corridors. So, the goal is to use those as those longer distance trips and use these on-demand services to connect. Utilize extra capacity of SMART where there's available, take advantage of private mobility providers by opening up the market and providing choice, exploring the potential to provide fare subsidy if a private carrier duplicates or connects to an intercommunity route, monitoring ridership to identify the need to add any additional corridors to offset on-demand service, and applying for additional funding through OTIF to better include Wellington County, who was late in this application, and not all the funding requirements of that county were identified, and working with Metrolinx to expand the one fare program. So those are sort of the opportunities that we explored. Now, to sort of bring it to the funding levels, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's OTIF funding that is available and was approved by the province to just under 9.5 million over a 5-year period. That's sort of that funding source shared amongst the participating counties. And the way it sort of operates is, the first year of funding, which is to sort of fund this study and maintaining some of the existing intercommunity services that are in place. But in year 2, that sort of maximum annual OTIF contribution will be about 70%, and it slowly scales down to a maximum of 30% in year 5. And overall OTIF contributions can't exceed more than 50% of municipal owned contribution, right? So whatever of that 9.5 million that was approved, it has to be sort of matched by the participating counties. It doesn't have to be the entire amount, but that 50% matching has to be there over that 5-year period. And of course, that municipal funding includes fare revenues as well. Now, one of the other opportunities that we're going to explore is, how do we sort of merge in provincial gas tax? And provincial gas tax is funding through the province that's only available if you have a permanent transit service in place. And the gas tax funding, whatever the allocation is, which is a formula that's based on ridership and population, the gas tax is up to 75% of the municipal spend for the previous 2 years. So it's not meant to replace municipal funding or fares, but it's meant to supplement and grow that service. So that's the gas tax portion that, you know, as we start to taper off from OTIF, there's that opportunity to sort of gain access to some of those gas tax funds, which is only available if you're providing a transit service. In terms of overall costs, one of our next things that we're going to do is start to think about what is this going to cost? What are each of these opportunities going to cost? So this is just a quick example of, you know, high level cost of operating transit. So when you look at sort of a long distance intercommunity corridor, they generally get anywhere between 3 and 6 boardings an hour. And for something that operates between 3 to 5 trips a day, up to 6 days a week, the cost can range from $300 to $820, depending on the length of that corridor, the frequency, et cetera. If you're getting into a shorter distance into community corridor, that could be about 150 to just under 300. And again, higher ridership because of that closer proximity. And then when you get into on-demand service, which generates usually between 1 to 2 boardings an hour, 10-hour days, 6 days a week, anywhere between 200 and 250 for that sort of on-demand vehicle. So that just sort of gives that sort of range and cost. And these are things that we're going to consider as we develop the financial plan. Now, once we do this, we're going to look at the overall governance and how it's going to be structured. And this is sort of important to figure out what is that best way for each of the counties and SMART to sort of work together to ensure that their interests are represented for decision making. So we're looking at 3 governance structures right now. It's fairly high level at this point, but we're getting into it a little bit more. The first is an intermunicipal shared service agreement. So this would be something like what Collingwood and the town of Blue Mountains does, where Collingwood is the lead agency and the town of Blue Mountains basically purchases that service and has Collingwood operate it on their behalf. So there's some level of agreement that's in place in terms of what that service is going to look like, but the town of Blue Mountains ultimately has that authority in terms of the level of investment that's provided within their municipal boundaries through an agreement that's set up before. We'll look at municipal governed nonprofit corporations. So the examples that you are most familiar with would be SMART along with the Swift Rural Broadband service that was provided by the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. So again, establishing a sort of a nonprofit regional board for that sort of interest of, you know, how are decisions being made across a number of different participating counties, appointing an executive director, and again, what does that representation of that board look like? Typically, it includes members of each county and council. And then finally, a joint municipal services board is the other one we look at. So the Niagara Transit Commission, which is a recently formed commission, region-wide, or in Alberta, there's the Bow Valley Regional Services Commission, which represents Banff, ID9, and Canmore, 3 independent municipalities that have formed a commission to sort of operate an independent transit service. Again, each of the municipalities have representation through the board. Some of them include citizen representation on that board with specific sets of expertise to help guide that board. And so obviously there's this commonality of interests that have to be made in terms of we have to agree on a fare structure, we have to agree on technology, we have to agree on procurement, et cetera. But when it comes down to funding it goes to each of the municipalities sort of make that decision on any increased levels of funding, et cetera. So these are all different governance options that we are currently looking at and will be evaluating based on strategic authority and mandate, based on the balance of regional integration and local control, So, does it create that seamless network, but it still allows some level of independence? And what is that appropriate balance? The financial authority and sustainability and the transparency and accountability. These are all sort of the things that we're currently looking at. So in terms of our next steps, once we're going to each of the counties in the SMART board over the next few weeks, and we're going to take this input. We're going to refine the service plan. We're going to look at conducting a fare structure analysis, create a financial plan, further refine that review of governance models and identify next steps for implementation should a decision be made to move forward. So we want to identify what does that look like, look at that second round of engagement, look at a provider plan and a fleet plan. So what size vehicles do we need? How is this contracted? What type of service? And finalize the recommendations. So those are the next steps that we have moving forward. So with that, I appreciate your time today, but I did want to open the floor up to questions through your worship. If we can maybe just go one by one and see if members of County Council have any thoughts or opinions of the 4 questions that I presented here today.
Okay, thank you, sir. A lot of information there for sure. I'm just wondering, would council like to take a short break before we dive into the questions? I see a few heads nodding. Well, why don't we do that? If you don't mind, sir. We'll break for, well, it's past. We'll try to be back in 5 minutes or so, and we'll go from there. Okay? We are recessed. 1 minute warning. Okay, we are back in session here. So as Dennis alluded to, he has 4 questions there. I wonder, Dennis, should we hear from Stephanie first and then go through the questions? Because you're good? Okay, all right then. Well, we'll press ahead with the question. So, Dennis, the floor is yours again.
Sorry. Through your worship, if I can stop to put the PowerPoint presentation up again, so we have the questions. Now through your worship, if it's all right, maybe what I'll do is I'll go through these first questions in order and then open up to any other general question, if that's fine with members of council. Yeah. Okay, sure, go ahead.
There we go. Yeah, I'm always green and it's red. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Warden or Deputy Warden, and through you. So thank you very much for the presentation. And yeah, I think we would all agree that if we have a core or the core areas where our buses are running, we want them as full as possible. So I'm going to talk about the integration part. And I like that what you say, Ridewell or Uber. So in my mind, so if you had the corridor from Owen Sound to Orangeville, obviously the same, I don't know if it's the same unit that drives down and drives back, but to be consistent of certain areas, and maybe it stops in Dundalk, stops in Markdale, thereabouts. Is there somewhere down the road for the integration that AI will be the brains behind figuring us all out? And the reason I say that is if you're living on the back of the Melanchthon town line, blah, 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 wherever, and you got to do this, this, and this, and you put it into something and it'll tell you, okay, this is what you got to do. Are we going to get to that point for the part of the efficiencies and so it might say, well, you're on your Uber, it'll take you to here, and then there's 10 connecting points between Owen Sound and Orangeville. But I guess my other question is can it be just in time? Because you probably have to book ahead. I don't know. But if your bus is running 50%, and if you get to that site and it's stopping every 2 hours at a site, couldn't you get on there if you have a system that says, okay, the bus is here, an hour from now, it'll be stopping here through an integrated system like AI or something that can figure it all out. So you can, through your phone today, everything is, apps and all that kind of stuff. Maybe I'm asking a lot of stuff, but I'm just thinking of the future wise where things are going. And, nowadays when you put something with AI, it'll tell you roughly what you can do, right? Is that going to be a system that will help keep our buses full?
For your worship, that's a great question. And yes, I see a future where there's AI. I'm probably out of a job in that future, but that's fine. But even today, there is that on-demand technology that's in place that allows, through sort of a back-end system, allows these vehicles that are in place to be optimized and integrated with a fixed route connection. So ensuring that these on-demand system that's in place has visibility of the fixed route service in real time when those vehicles are connecting to each stop, will potentially allow that on-demand service to connect to that fixed route and complete your trip. So there is some of that's in place already, and that's something that we want to utilize either through some of the existing on-demand providers or specialized service providers that are in place that, for example, Smart currently uses, or another on-demand technology provider, such as the one Wellington County uses, or someone completely new that may be able to provide that integrated solution. But that's something that we are looking at. And what are those other mobility options that we can leverage as well? So individuals see all potential options that they have available to them. So that's progressing. It's continuing to grow. There's obviously some limitations, but keeps moving forward and progressing.
Thank you, through Deputy Warden again. Yeah, because I look at your core routes as dependable, on time, and people can then bank on, they know that, you know, it's gonna stop in Markdale at 2 o'clock. Maybe it's 11 o'clock in the morning, but then it's to get there. And I guess that the system can say, well, we're only at 50% ridership. There's space on that, then you can do your other ride shares or whatever to know that you got space. Right. And obviously, if they're talking to each other, I think that's very important, especially with as time goes on with these, you know, and technology, like, you know, 10 years ago, Uber was like, well, you phone Uber, it's there. Right. If they have that service. Right. But the thing is it's looking at those efficiencies and the ability to do it. So I'm happy to hear what you're saying.
Okay, any other comments on that? Oh, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Warden. Good morning. Dennis, thank you very much for the presentation. Certainly a lot of information. You talked about point-to-point service and RideWell in coordination with Uber, trying to coordinate that through the four counties. Can you tell me what the barriers are for Uber being more readily available throughout the 4 counties, and also the Wellington experience with RideWell? As far as a fare structure, how much money Wellington is putting into that system, because the dollars and cents are going to be, you know, what drives us at the end of the day. So thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Through your worship, thank you for that question. So, you know, in terms of that sort of level, or the barriers to sort of getting these ride sharing companies in place, obviously, there's a couple of different barriers that need to be addressed. One is more of a bylaw legislative barrier to make sure that the market is open to allowing rideshare and taxis within communities. So it's something we haven't looked at quite yet, but it's on our agenda to look at to see if there are any barriers in place within the 4 counties to allow these services to open up into the market. The second one is really around density. So like Uber and other ride sharing models are really based on, one, it's the availability of potential trip requests. So if there's not a lot of trip requests, drivers who, the way they sort of operate, are not going to have a lot of potential fares. They're going to be sitting around because they get paid when they get a ride. And so they may not open up their app and provide that availability. And second is the availability of drivers. So typically where these ride sharing companies flourish is where there's a large urban market where they can draw on drivers to open up. So even if it's open up, it will likely only be within some of the larger communities within across the 4 counties, and not across all 4 counties. And even in Wellington County's place, if you're north of Fergus Elora, the chances of you getting an Uber are limited just because there isn't that density there. So when we're looking at something like this opening up, it's not going to be opened up universally across all 4 counties. Some places it just doesn't make sense from a market perspective, but where it does make sense, let's take advantage of it. Let's leverage it. In terms of that integration that's currently in place, there's just an agreement with the existing on-demand service provider that just allows those rides to be visible on the app. And so again, it's just providing options where it is available. The county doesn't fund Uber. It's just, if you want to take our on-demand service, which we've partially subsidized the fare, you can take it. But if you need to travel now and one of our services is not available and you're willing to pay an extra $5 or whatever it is for an Uber service, you have an option available for it. So it's just really about opening up options where we can make these private sector opportunities available.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eccles.
throughout your presentation, over here, throughout the presentation, Dennis, I noticed you were using mobility and transit kind of and to me, a mobility service is considerably different than a transit service. What do you see as the greatest risks on trying to integrate a mobility service into a transit service?
Through your worship, thank you for that question. Yeah, my apology. When I use the term mobility, I talk just about mobility options. And there's several ways to provide those options, public transit being one, specialized transit, community transportation, but I get where you're going with that question, and I appreciate it. The risks of integration are obviously, are we going to potentially result in, trip denials for persons with disabilities because we're now opening up the eligibility to all passengers. And there's ways that we can, ensure that we're not doing that. We're taking advantage of excess capacity while protecting those rides for individuals with disabilities. And example could be, opening up, allowing, eligible passengers to book a ride, up to, 2 weeks in advance. But for other passengers who don't have a disability, maybe it's 3 days in advance, and that's when it opens up to everybody else. So that allows us to make sure that priority is there for individuals with disabilities. Also through the eligibility criteria, if there's certain passengers that, need very direct service, can't deviate that much, need to be in a vehicle independently because of the nature of their disability. There's certain eligibility criteria that we can identify that says this passenger needs to have more of a direct trip. Other passengers who are able to stay in the vehicle longer and share a ride, we do not have that constraint. So it allows us to take advantage of any excess capacity and that service that's already in place.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. One of the questions here is a preference on type of governance model. I get maybe the intermunicipal shared service agreement's the one that jumps out at me. The only question being downstream, if there was a partner that decided that it was going to reduce their budget contribution, is there one of the governance models that handles such an instance perhaps in 3 or 4 years better than the other?
Through your worship, I think the commission type structure is probably the one that handles that the best. Like in every sort of governance model, there needs to be an agreement on some basic parameters such as fare structure, policies and procedures around service, branding, things like that. Where services cross municipal boundaries, again, probably some level of agreement that takes place ahead of time. But with the opportunity for certain partners to either reduce or increase their level of service as they see fit that makes sense for their municipality. So it's mainly based on that level of service as opposed to how the service is operated or structured. And this is where, some of the examples that we showed in here where we sort of had a corridor that, the GHOST service, for example, between Owen Sound and Guelph. Well, we think there's a higher demand between Fergus, Elora and Guelph too, and that would supplement, right? So one of the Wellington County could say, well, we want to pay for additional service because we think that there's more demand on this very long corridor that it isn't being serviced. So those are some of the decisions that can be made through that sort of governance approach, as long as there's some basic agreements in place about what a shared service looks like and what that minimum level of service is.
Okay, thank you for that. When I went through the report at first day, one thing that jumps out at me is we are, if you take a look at that 4% that the survey respondents noted would be using transit daily. out of almost 3,800 survey respondents, that's about 150, 155 people. So what we're probably looking at today is a service that is not responding to demand, rather a service that is predicated upon growth. So what moving forward are the measurables in terms of cost recovery, financial reporting that would be coming back to councils to be able to measure the success of transit as the years go by? Because it's clearly, there's no disputing that. It's totally predicated on growth. So we're undertaking a service here that is absolutely necessary to have tremendous growth to make it viable. We've got funding for 4 years. It's noted here, improving level of service in high demand or implementing lower demand corridors. Personally, I rode Ghost, I rode FlexBus, great services. Part of the challenge is getting people in the community to be aware of it and buy into the service that's available to them, because it can save you money as opposed to driving your own vehicle. So there's marketing costs. There's getting the message out. Improving level of service in high demand is probably more advantageous in a couple of years of getting gas tax revenues better than incurring higher costs overall for the service provision and then realizing lesser in gas tax reimbursement and so forth. Anyway, just your comments on the type of financial reporting that would come back and monitoring the growth that would be needed for the service.
Through your worship, thank you for that question. It's part of our scope is to look at developing some KPIs that would be sort of suitable for monitoring. We haven't got to that point yet in this study, but we would look at things like what's the overall cost recovery ratio and how does it compare to sort of other services like that operate in similar geographies. We can look at things like boardings per capita. So based on the ridership that looks at that, it's not just ridership as a static number, but relative to the population growth that's occurring. If that continues to grow, we can look at things like the utilization of the service. So boardings per hour of service that you provide. So how well utilized is that corridor? And there's even opportunities to sort of, take surveys of residents to see sort of how often that they use it and how it sort of impacts their lives. So there's a couple of different financial KPIs and productivity KPIs that we can look at, but also KPIs in terms of, what percentage of the community that has benefit from the service as well. So they're more level of service or benefit KPIs to the community as well. What percentage of vulnerable populations are within a close proximity to the service as well. So those are other KPIs that we can look at.
And my last question is, how is Smart Transit, which is a service existing right now, protected potentially in 4 or 5 years or down the road if there were to be significant changes to this program, where Smart is still able to exist, I guess, and not be caught up with reductions in this new service provision? I'm just wondering, like, have you considered that? Like, what could the future of Smart look like? Is it still there, or is it more susceptible down the road?
Through your worship, it is something that we're looking at, and we have another firm that's working with us that recently met with Smart and is looking at their mandate. So that's part of that governance review that we're looking at. But we're not looking to replace Smart with this service. Smart has a core mandate, including a mandate that has nothing to do with this service, like including bringing individuals to the city of Toronto for a medical appointment and things like that. That doesn't change under this proposal. It's about better utilize or adding to Smart, better utilizing any existing service hours that they have where they're not transporting passengers by opening up that eligibility, increasing the amount of service that they provide. So if 5 years down the road this partnership, for example, doesn't work out, they still have that core mandate available to them, and that funding that has been provided to provide the service that they're currently providing. So
Okay, any further questions? Counselor DeBreen.
Thank you, Deputy Warden, and thank you for the presentation. Most of my questions have been answered from the presentation by you elaborating on things and the questions around the table. I too had the question about what happens if a partner decides to exit. I know that in the SMART model, you give a year's notice that you have intention to exit the program. I also know that the per capita cost that we invest the municipal levy to support SMART is pretty significant. So as we expand the opportunity to those who don't need specialized service, could bring those costs down. Is the intent to explore a phased-in approach? I believe you touched on that briefly, because I think if we were to look at the SMART model, integrate with SMART and the private sector to handle some of those in-between connections, we could model an introductory phase and then upscale as the funding and the capacity warranted or supported it, and vice versa, the ability to, this is, we're not getting the ridership, we've got the deadhead kilometers, as you mentioned. Will that be further explored as an option?
Through your worship, certainly phasing is something that we're going to be looking at. So, I had a whole list of corridors out there, and this is our dream set of corridors, not necessarily something that's going to be implemented in reality. And one of the benefits of like SMART or on demand is, if let's say we start with 2 or 3 of those corridors, right? And then we start to monitor, through SMART or on demand what the travel patterns are, and we start to say, well, hold on, we're spending a lot of money making this connection because it's constantly being requested, and would it be more cost effective to switch that to a fixed route intercommunity corridor that's more reliable and travels at the same time every day, rather than deadheading vehicles in and around trying to service that travel demand. So that could be also part of that phased approach, which we have identified KPIs of when to make that transition, because it's more cost effective to switch to an intercommunity corridor than to have an on demand. Likewise, if we have an intercommunity corridor that just isn't meeting that ridership potential, we could phase that back into a more on demand type service to provide that connectivity to other corridors that are seeing that ridership kind of growth. So this is not we will have a plan with some post phasing, but whoever is going to be operating the service, should it be approved, this is going to be sort of a work in progress, right? As it usually takes a couple of years for people to change their travel patterns and get used to a service, but then we monitor and look at the data, see how it's being used, and we're flexible and how we implement it. So yes, there will be that phasing in place.
Thank you for that. And I wanted just to touch on the private sector, the on-demand, the Ubers, the ride shares, we're seeing recently the pop-up shuttle services to the airport, people, being entrepreneurial and creating a service for hire. What are the parameters of creating a regulation to invite those individuals and others who see the opportunity to get into a taxi or Uber, or I'm sure there's a certain level of insurance and vulnerable sector check or criminal record check. What are those criteria? Or I'm sure we'll explore that, because I think that as we roll something out, there will be others who see the opportunity to, hey, I could do that. And so will that be explored further?
Through your worship, certainly something that's sort of the intent of what to explore, right? And unfortunately, I don't have all the answers to you in terms of what is required, but something that we'll be exploring. But really, it's just about opening up the market and allowing the opportunity to come in. I can't force somebody to come in and provide the service. I just need to make it attractive to come in. And the way it's sort of, one way to look at it is you're not competition, you're complementary. Right? So do I need to invest as much of this into this if the private sector is doing it for me? They've established a business case. So that's why we're looking at, if FlixBus is already providing a service, can I better utilize that service rather than duplicate it? Right? If Uber says I want to come to town, great. How do we take advantage of that? As opposed to duplicate it, right? So it's not going to happen everywhere across all 4 counties, but where it does, if we can open up that market and take advantage of it and view them as complementary, especially in an environment where it's very difficult to provide sustainable transportation service, but we know the need is there. So let's leverage that private sector contribution.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Warden Milne. I don't know if it's a question, it's so much of a comment. When looking at the next steps, structure, develop the plan, conduct the fair structure analysis and calculate the financial plan. And then, question 4 here is, what are the measures of success that can place and mitigate the risk? I think the biggest challenge that we've seen with the previous service that Grey County is limited now is because once that funding model cut off, we saw that the fare structure versus the cost of the county was just so disproportionate. It was hard to justify the cost. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to continue moving this project forward, which there is a value in seeing and being done. You kind of just said it there at the end of your last statement, which was, the challenge of knowing the need exists, but to try to actually make it work is a challenge because of the financial cost. That'll be the biggest, I think, motivation or support for future success is coming to this county and the 4 counties collectively to see what is the ride fare that is justifiable and affordable for the people we want to ride, which we know we're looking at target demographic, that they have a need, that they can't afford their own private rides, but also not making it so burdensome on the county that becomes disproportionately logical or feasible to continue the service. So it's that financial plan that I need to see coming forward, and how accurate is it going to be, because that becomes the crux of it. And it is a challenge. I appreciate the idea of trying to integrate that ability for outside agencies connecting into the service we're trying to provide, because it is the point to point of somebody who lives on rural road X trying to connect to where the actual shuttle lines are. And that becomes the greatest challenge. So I am looking forward to seeing more detail come forward, but it's that financial plan, I think, that'll have the biggest crux of success or to mitigate the risk of losing the funding from the counties.
Okay. Councillor Hope.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I know it's early days and I recognize the need for the financial plan and many more details. Public engagement is a big issue at the town of Blue Mountains. So I think you've set aside some time to come and do some public engagement, but what in your mind does that look like in terms of the consultation that you plan to do at this point? Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Through your worship, we've already conducted the majority of our engagement so far to sort of better understand the need for the service and what that's going to look like. Once we develop the plan, we're still sort of trying to figure out how we want to go back to the public and sort of engage that. So we're still kind of working that through a little bit, so I can have more detail for you a little later on.
Any further questions? Okay. Oh, Councillor Mackey, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Dennis, you talked about gas tax funding. Saugeen Mobility is highly dependent on gas tax funding. In an integrated system, how would that gas tax still be applicable only to SMART and not to the overall system, I guess?
Through your worship, yeah, so you're right. So Saugeen Mobility currently receives gas tax funding, and so there's the potential of unused or gas tax that we're currently not collecting. So gas tax is based on sort of two formulas. One is population, one is ridership. So there's a potential to increase that gas tax if we start to include municipalities that currently don't collect gas tax right now across all 4 counties, right? Not just within Gray. So if like, so for example, yeah, so we can include that population that's not currently collecting. The second one would be as ridership grows, that's also a factor in terms of how gas tax funding is allocated. The third factor is in terms of the allocation and your municipal spend. So one of the things we're trying to figure out is if we're getting the full allocation of gas tax funding that's available to us based on the amount of municipal contribution that's currently coming in. And if there's unused portions that we can gather by consolidating, by increasing the municipal spend across all 4 counties, then that's something that we would do. And then it's a matter of figuring out a formula that says, how do we distribute that gas tax funding to ensure that some of it continues to go to SMART, but also some of it starts to fund some of this inter-community service that we've identified. So it will sort of all be consolidated at the end of the day, supporting the service plan.
Okay. Councillor McQueen.
Just a very quick one. Can you provide us in the future the consensus or not consensus, but the number of people that don't have cars? I think everyone here drove here today. But is there a certain segment, 20%, 10%? Is there something that you can get that data and where that growth data will be? Because most cases, if you have a car or 2 cars, you're probably not going to use transit in most cases, unless you got kids or seniors or whatever. Can you provide that data, or do you have that data?
Through your worship, I don't have it right now. There may, if I don't, let me look into that a little bit more detail. If I can't get that data, I can get things like, what percentage of the population is over a certain age or under a certain age where logically they wouldn't have a car, income brackets, things like that, that will provide us a better sense of how many people have vehicles in their household.
Okay. All right, not seeing any further hands. I'll call the question to you receive the report. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Carr. Thank you, Stephanie. Good report, lots of discussion. We look forward for the future. Thank you. Okay, moving on. It is a report here regarding the C-Line Operations Depot Design Build RFP, and Sean is here to give us that report. Would someone care to move the receive that part? Councillor Eccles, Councillor Pringle. Sean, the floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, Deputy Warden and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present today regarding the award of contract for the C-Line Depot Design Build project, documented in report TRCW 14-26. So to recap and to provide some background on where we're at with this project, Transportation Services purchased a 39.5 acre property at the intersection of Gray Road 4 and Gray Road 14 in April of 2025. Since that time, we commissioned multiple studies and reports, including a geotechnical study, a stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment, a stormwater management brief, topographic survey, and conceptual engineering designs. So the purpose of today's report is straightforward: to show the results of RFP TS 15-26 and to seek council's approval to award the contract for the design build of the new C-Line Public Works Depot. As noted in the report, this work was provided for in the budget and plan and is necessary to address the long-term operational capacity of Patrol D. Patrol D currently operates out of a leased building in Flesherton and an owned building in Dundalk. and this project represents a long-term purpose-built solution. So the RFP was issued on January 16th, 2026 and closed on February 19th, 2026. 8 general contractors were pre-qualified and five of those submitted proposals. Proposals were evaluated using the criteria outlined in the RFP. So experience and qualifications, 20%, methodology and technical approach, 40%, sustainability and innovation, 10%, and price, 30%. The respondents were required to achieve a minimum technical score of 50 out of 70 to proceed to the pricing. One submission did not meet this threshold. Following the evaluation, Dom Construction Limited was the ranked highest overall. So staff are recommending that council award the contract to Dom Construction Limited for a total amount of $7,508,000 excluding HST. And this includes the design build of a new Public Works Operations Depot and a standalone winter material storage building. The design also incorporates room to allow the depot to function as a secondary backup emergency operations center, or EOC. As this report notes, Grey County currently has no backup facilities from which a secondary or alternate EOC could be run. So this addition significantly strengthens the county's emergency preparedness. So the total projected cost after the HST rebate is $9,041,654. This includes a construction contingency of 10%, a utility allowance, an IT allowance, and all associated permit fees. The project is currently over budget by $1,281,354, or 16.5%. After applying additional eligible development charges funding, the remaining deficit is $1,097,189. Staff recommend funding this deficit in the following order. First, through any 2026 Transportation Services capital construction surplus. Currently, we're sitting at around $400,000 with 2 bridge rehabilitations, 2 culvert replacements, and 1 road reconstruction left to tender in 2026. Secondly, from the Transportation Domes and Depots Reserve, which has a projected year-end balance of $978,090. And thirdly, from the Transportation Services General Reserve, which has a projected end-of-year balance of $5,262,403. The RFP required net zero ready submissions supporting the county's climate change action plan targets. Net zero ready buildings are highly energy efficient structures built to the same strict standards as net zero homes, so often 80% more efficient than code minimums, but without the installed renewable energy systems like solar panels. They feature superior insulation, high performance windows, airtight construction, and are designed to allow easy future installation of renewable energy options. So the recommendation to council, staff respectfully recommend that council receive the report TRCW 14-26, award RFP TS 15-26 to Dom Construction Limited, approve the proposed funding strategy for the project deficit, and authorize staff to proceed prior to council approval under section 26B of the procedural bylaw. So in closing, this project represents a major step forward in ensuring the long-term operational capacity for Patrol D, improving our emergency readiness, and supporting economic growth and prosperity of Grey County. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Sean. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Keaveney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden. And Sean, I'm just wondering, can you suggest then, will this construction meet green building standards that we've heard about from our climate change manager? Is that where you're headed in terms of the construction that you are undertaking? Yes, thank you.
That's a short answer, or have you got more? Sean, go ahead.
area. So, and just to elaborate, yes, we have been in communication with our climate change team, and they proposed this strategy, including putting an RFP for a net zero ready building design without the renewable energy options, which would vastly inflate the price at the current time, but it allows for that later retrofit of those options. And they've also recommended that we participate in the Enbridge's Savings by Design program. So for the purposes of this RFP and for consistency in bidding, we've asked all of the design build teams to bid as if they're bidding on a propane energy source, which is why and then later on, they would participate in the Savings by Design program through Enbridge, which will help inform which energy source that we'll use ultimately, which is also why we've carried a utility allowance that in case there's any extra funding that's necessary, should propane not be the decided energy source, then we'll have some wiggle room there to work with another upgrade potentially.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Greg, please.
Two questions. First question, if you go back to that one slide, there's a stormwater management pond. With the tender being over budget like it is there any contemplation for the requirement for that stormwater management pond, noting that this is in the middle of agricultural land? It's not a couple blocks over here outside of a Walmart in an urban setting. Many times I go past Gray Roots and I wondered, at what point was that parking lot over constructed just and the cost then for a stormwater management bond was borne by the taxpayer. So just first question is on the actual requirements of the stormwater management pond, or is that something that can be rescoped as you're working with the contractor?
So it's a great question. Again, this was structured as an RFP and any design drawings were conceptual design drawings. Our team internally, we decided that we would include in our Pearson engineering drawings to include a stormwater management pond as a best practice. So the property, it is agricultural, as you noted. So in terms of reducing peak volume flows and that sort of thing, we didn't see it as a totally crucial design element in that respect, but it is bordering a significant, I shouldn't say significant, it is bordering a wetland. And we just felt that that was the best practice to limit the amount of contaminants that would potentially be running into a wetland.
Okay, you're the professional. I don't know if a bioswale would have been cheaper or less expensive or contemplated, but that's the first question. Question two is, do you have an approximate cost on what it is to make it net zero ready? Because I can see the difference. I realize the difference between making an apartment building net zero ready or certain other buildings, but this has 10 bays that largely may be open at different times, letting large equipment in. So I think that I see a difference between a shop like this and the extra cost of making it net zero ready, unless you're speaking more to like just the office component of it. But is this throughout the whole building? And if it is, what kind of extra cost is borne just in undertaking that design?
Yeah, and through the deputy warden. So yes, it is incorporated throughout the design of the entire building. So the RFP required that they all be net zero ready submissions. This means that the building must meet modern energy efficiency standards. So they weren't considered as extras. For example, they're part of the climate commitments and to reduce our long-term operating costs. So in terms of the bid table, any sort of commitments or design elements that were specifically for net zero ready, they weren't considered as a separate line item, like as an option. So they're just included in our overall design costs for the building. And so we didn't have separate line items for if you went with the insulation with an R value of R15, for example, it would cost this versus an R value of R20 would cost this. So it's just the structure of the RFP process kind of, it would limit us in that regard. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right, for now, anyway. Anyone else have any questions? Counselor McQueen, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden, and yeah, I'm happy to see us moving forward for sure. Gives us a little bit more security about our equipment in the future. The question is, it's 39.5 acre property and we purchased it over a year ago. I guess it's sort of two questions. What's the plan with the remaining property? Because the one time we talked about severing off the cluster of buildings to recoup. If we got a deficit, is that an option to get some more money back? Because obviously, I think that was talked about when we purchased it as well.
And through the deputy warden. So it is still on the table. It's not reflected in our funding model here. Just for the fact that we're not quite there yet. So some of the considerations for the we have to have consideration for the design of the roundabout at Gray Road 4 and Gray Road 14 to allow us to know what we'll be able to sever. We also have some considerations for having space for recycled asphalt, for example. Potentially, utilizing the farm as a demonstration farm as well. So all those questions are sort of in the next phase of this project in my mind. But they're still on the table at this point.
Roundabout, wow. Yeah, well, I just, I think we had the same conversation. I heard an earshot here about, roundabout there. Yeah. That makes sense. But I just, if there are surplus lands that could be utilized by somebody else and purchase it, it's just always something that we did talk about. And, if it's something we don't need, there's a good heritage barn in there, right? All that stuff, right? So, okay, well, that's good to hear that there's still things in the work, because if there's ways to recoup some of that deficit, then you want to keep an eye on that as well.
Okay, any further? Oh, Counselor DeBreen, you had a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I was wanting to just expand on the net zero is if it was driving much of the over budget situation and whether or not there's an opportunity to reduce that. Obviously, we're hoping that we're going to come in under budget by 400,000 on other projects, but with everything coming in over budget, or not everything, but the prospect that they could come in over budget, we don't know what's out there. If you had a crystal ball, that'd be wonderful. But I'm just wondering, how do we address this over budget situation when we know there are other tenders coming down that we're going to need to consider? And perhaps my question is, Deputy Warden, perhaps my question is, how confident are you that we'll come in with those under budget situations to help cover this project? Because I know that this project is very critical in the grand scheme. It's one of the dominoes to paramedic services moving out of the Dundalk Fire Depot into another facility because we have the plan to move the depot to this central locations. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for the question. So I can speak to our risk management strategies for this project to ensure that that we're getting the best value for the dollar and that we're not looking at project overages and stuff like that. In terms of the other capital projects that are left to be tendered, I'd really defer to Pat and to Trevor for their sense on that, on how the rest of the projects will come on this year. I do know there's been a mix of some where we actually came in under budget, and there's been some that have recently come in over budget. So that number, that 400,000 number, does fluctuate, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know how those projects will come in at the end of the year. In terms of where I think a lot of the $1.2 million overage is coming from is the increase in material costs in 2026. So steel has gone up in price significantly, and I think that's reflected in the the proposals here that we received. And that's driven, to my understanding, primarily from reduced imports coming into the country, and then just construction competition for the construction of data centers around North America. The other thing that I would just notice too, or I would note and point out, is that $1.2 million overage is really attributed to our contingency that we have there of almost 800,000, a 10% contingency, as well as our allowance for the utilities at 500,000. So between those two items, there's potentially some savings there, but we want to be prudent and financially responsible. In terms of risk, so just given that we have like a local contractor on board that we've worked with in the past, that provides a lot of comfort in terms of, like, is a 10% contingency enough to cover us, noting that we're not industry experts in building designs. I think Pat would probably be okay with me designing and building his birdhouse, but probably not like a multi-million-dollar facility. So in terms of the risk, I think we've done our due diligence as well in terms of like getting all these studies ahead of time. So we've got our geotechnical study and we've got our archaeological. So to avoid those potential, potholes that could creep up through the construction process. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question and answer. Any other questions? So, okay, go ahead, Councillor Eccles.
Thank you. Now that have released or awarded the tender and whatnot, have we worked with the company, with DOMS, to see if there's anything that they think that we have in the proposal overpriced, overdid, that they can find some savings within this?
Through the deputy warden, thank you for the question. So Dom is learning about this in real time. So we're not, per the purchasing policy, we're not allowed to work with them prior to this meeting today. So if that's council's direction to us to negotiate price savings, then that would be the trigger us to go back and start having those conversations with Dom on scope and that sort of thing. However, I would just caution that this is a time-sensitive project, which is why we're asking for approval today. Anticipation that we need to be ready for the 2026-2027 winter season. So time is of the essence. We go back and we start negotiating these things, then we could potentially maybe not be approved for another 4 weeks from today. So that's just one of the things that I would like to caution, but thank you.
Through you, Deputy Warden, and further to Sean's comments, once awarded, if this motion passes, as Sean indicated, we'd be working with Dom to see if there's any potential for savings. We've done that with previous projects, working with Dom, and they've been good to work with on those other projects to see where we can make sure we can, if there's savings to be found, we'll work with them on that. And they've also been really good to work with to make sure that we're not dipping into those contingencies. And as Sean indicated, because we've done some of that due diligence work ahead of this, we're hoping that the risk is low for any surprises to pop up, I'll say, along the way. But of course, to make sure that we have those, we have built in those contingencies, which, as Sean has indicated, is making up really the bulk of the difference in terms of the overage for the overall project.
Thank you, Randy. Any other questions? I was just from the chair. I was just going to say that I count 18 overhead doors on the proposal here. Now, I have been in the current garage, if I can call it that. I don't think there's in excess of maybe half a dozen. So this is quite an upgrade. So I would think that there might be some room to negotiate that maybe we don't need 18 16 by 12 foot holes in the wall that are going to be open on a regular basis. But anyway, that's just my insight for what it's worth. All right, any further questions on the proposal? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. So I am apprised that lunch is here. It's not a hot lunch, but it is here nonetheless. But I'm thinking if we can get close to the end of the agenda by 12:30, we can maybe finish this off before we break for lunch. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm seeing that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that the chair is trying. So the next report is the response time performance plan results from Kevin here. And certainly, Kevin, this is important stuff. I didn't mean to rush your report by any means or anyone else's report, but just give you the floor. Yours, sir.
No problem. Good morning.
I apologize, sir. I need to jump in there. I don't think we need a mover and seconder. Councillor McKay and Councillor McQueen. Sorry, Kevin. Go ahead.
Morning, Deputy Warden and County Council. Pleased to be here and hopefully not take too much of the time here, but I'll try to cover it as best as I can too. So today, just the motion is to submit our response time results for the 2025 year prior to March 31st. So the county, each year we develop a response time plan for the upcoming year. We generally have a report to council in August, and we have to have it submitted to the Ministry of Health in October. The results that are today were for last year for 2025, and we have to report them before March 31st each year. The targets that we developed were developed in 2012 based upon where we were at that point with our response times. The response times are broken down into responses to sudden cardiac arrest, CTAS 1 through 5, and based upon our most life-threatening calls, code 4s. Despite rising call volumes, we've never increased our response time. We have actually improved upon the response times, but where we were at in 2015 for the 2016 year, we went from 50% of the time being there in 8 minutes to raising that target that we'd be there in 60% of the time. And then also for our CTAS 3 to 5, our less urgent calls, that we would be there in 20 minutes, 90% of the time versus 30 minutes, 90% of the time. As far as call volume goes, we continue to see increases in call volume. The ORH Comprehensive Deployment Review had said that we would see a 5.8% increase in calls every year over the next 10 years. The last year was 8.96%, or just over 1,400 more calls. We generally look at these at over longer periods of time though, because there's years where you have low numbers and areas that you have not high numbers, but even looking at a 5 and 10 year, 5 years, we're at 43% over 5 years, and 10 years, and that works out to about 8.6 per year. Over a 10 year, we're still sitting at 6.6. So it is slightly higher than what ORH had predicted through the review. So these are our results. We report them on a countywide plan. And you can see here that we met in all targets other than the CTAS 1 in 8 minutes. 60% of the time we were slightly under, just over 1%. And then also for the CTAS 2 in 15 minutes, we were slightly under the response time percentage, again, just over 1%. On the right, though, I think it's good to look at a 5-year average to see where we are maintaining, and they're remaining relatively consistent. As far as looking at lower tiers, it's not a requirement by the ministry to report on lower tiers, but we do just to show the differences across the county. It's recognized that there are lower tiers that have longer response time than others. Typically, this is about distance, and the work that we're doing with the ORH Comprehensive Deployment Review, by adding bases, we hope to be able to continue to work on these response times in our more rural areas. You definitely get more benefit with your ambulances in your highest urban areas. That's where most of your calls take place. But we try to balance that out as best we can with spreading our resources where we don't have multiple units sitting together. We try to spread them out wherever we can. So this chart will breaks it down by your lower tier municipalities. You can see the numbers in red where we did not meet the targets. Keeping in mind our sudden cardiac arrest and our CTAS 1 calls, these are less than 200 or just over 200 calls a year in a number of calls of 17,000. If you look at areas like Owen Sound and Hanover, where it is a fairly small area to respond to, those numbers are pretty good. But when you get outside those areas, you know, that's where you see those numbers change. And if you think about a 6-minute response time, that's really a 4.5-minute drive time. It's not from the time you leave the building, it's from the time the pager goes off. So you have to get in the truck, find out where you're going, which is a lot better now because we have digital mapping, but then get to that location. So you have to build that in, and it's the same with the 8-minute response. You have to, you know, you're looking at probably 6.5 or a 7-minute drive time. We did modeling in the past and we showed maps that really you're just kind of looking around the periphery of the town to meet in those areas. So it is tough in the more rural areas to meet those. But still the drivers of 15 minutes. Again, that's our target for our rural area and really around the ORH. We looked at 8 minutes for urban and 15 minutes for our rural. You know, as a system, we're right around that 15 minutes mark. And then 20 minutes for CTAS 3, 4, and 5. We generally are there within that time frame. This is a driver that I look at a lot is the 90th percentile, 9 times out of 10. How long does it take to get there on a code 4 call? It's 15 minutes and 32 seconds. We were just, I think, 6 seconds over the year before. And that number has been anywhere from about 14.5 minutes. And it's been as high as 17, but in the last number of years, it's been in that 15-minute category. And our average response time, it doesn't really tell you much because there's like 2-minute response times, 25-minute response times, but it's good to keep an eye on this to see if the average for every call is going up. This past year, it's 750. Last year it was 749. So we're kind of holding in that area. It's just a good monitoring tool for us. This year, there's some changes coming. We're moving to a new triage tool, a dispatch. It is all implemented through the Ministry of Health. It really is more of a dispatch tool than ours, but it reflects the way we get dispatched to emergency calls. Right now, emergency calls are your urgent versus emergent are broken down into 2 levels. They'll actually be broken down into 5. There'll be color codes, green, yellow, orange, and then red and purple. And with the red and purple being your most serious calls, a red would be like a chest pain, shortness of breath, and a purple is going to be like an obvious immediate threat, unconscious, cardiac arrest. This system actually that they're implementing does a really good job of protecting high priority calls. Because right now, if you have a chest pain call and you're in a community and a cardiac arrest comes in, you can't reassign that ambulance. What happens though with this new dispatching tool, they can actually take you off of that chest pain. Not that that's not serious, but we know there's a higher threat that they can take you off. So we look forward to those changes to help again with those higher priority calls. We also are through the budget process, we've been approved to do another update to our comprehensive deployment review. We'll be looking at going back to RH to look at the plan that we have in place to 2033, ensuring it meets the criteria that we put in place around call volumes, response times, looking at updated populations, looking at base locations. We did reduce the plan a bit, so see how that looks against that as well. And then also building in the new MPDS, the new triage tool is a good time to do that. And then also more changes coming. There's actually a new response time standard that will be implemented. I'm not sure yet, but it'll be either later this year or most likely next year. We'll be going away from the CTAS level of 1 through 5 and sudden cardiac arrest. We'll be looking at for the ministry reporting similar, or for code 4 calls, which we read purples, they'll be reported on a percentile basis to the ministry, and then we'll be looking at locally about the lower priority calls. I look forward to this. It actually does speak more to our geography. We're going to break it down into as far as population density. It'll be broken down into urban areas, rural areas, and remote. For us in Gray, we'll have, based upon what we see today, unless it changes, our urban area today would be Hanover and Owen Sound, and the rest of the county would be rural. Again, all this stuff is in planning, but it's being close to being released here now. I get the benefit, I sit on the committee, so I know some of the back end of it all, but yeah, look forward to that type of breaking it down and giving more realistic response times to people that live in the urban versus rural. And we don't have any remote areas, but think about the struggles of the north. Looking to respond to a 6-minute call, it's really difficult. So anyways, we hope to be able to incorporate all that into the new comprehensive deployment review. That'll help us going forward. And again, it's just, we talked about doing that check-in to see where we're at, and we'll be able to start that soon and get back to us in the fall here and for direction. Yep. So I actually talked about that with the clip in the slide. So anyways, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that report, Kevin. Are there any questions? Councillor DeBreen, please.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Thank you, Kevin. Back a little bit ago, there was some concerns about response time in the Southwest area. Can you refresh my memory that we have mutual aid agreements? The dispatch could come from Wellington North or Dufferin in the south. Because I can't imagine having to dispatch from Dundalk to get to, the southwest corner that's closest to Mount Forest. Can you just elaborate on how that is integrated into dispatch and helps with the improved response time?
So there's 2 levels of response: the code 4 life and death emergency, which we consider a seamless system. Where if wherever the closest ambulance is, then they send that vehicle. So you look at Southgate, we border on the Cambridge dispatch, which would be Dufferin County and Wellington County. And based upon where those ambulances are, if it's closer to Mount Forest, then they would be sent. The thing is, we don't always know where Mount Forest is. They could be on standby in Arthur. So we do rely upon them somewhat, but they can't always be there. For the lower priority calls, the municipalities around us, other than Bruce and Gray, we work back and forth together. But for code 3 calls, there are calls. They're urgent calls, not life and death, not emergent. So that they are sent to us. They will not be double dispatched.
Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, moving on to the report regarding Build Canada Homes program. We have Anne Marie Shaw here with us today. She's going to take that report. I need a mover and seconder to receive that report. Councillor Dickert and Councillor Pringle. Anne Marie.
Thank you, Deputy Warden, and good afternoon, Council. Build Canada Homes, or BCH, is a new federal agency that will build and finance affordable housing to scale. This is replacing the National Housing Strategy Affordable Build Program that was in existence for a few years. There's not a whole lot of information out there, but the program is starting up. I believe there have been a number of pilot projects that have been done throughout the country, and their portal is now open and they're looking at any applications. So they are looking to construct transitional, supportive community and non-market housing. And what they mean by non-market housing is housing that the rent is below the average market rent. BCH considers housing projects that are new construction, repurposing of non-residential buildings, and additions to existing buildings. They're looking to support a pipeline of projects rather than just one project. So they're looking at that larger scale. We're proposing to be the lead to bring together nonprofit and ourselves, nonprofit organizations that are looking at building. So we're working closely right now with some of our nonprofit providers that have projects that are waiting for funding or are somewhere along the continuum of being almost ready, shovel ready, and viable. So I wanted to bring this information to County Council just to let them know that this new agency is in existence now, and that we are hoping to come back sometime in the spring with a list of projects that we would like to put forward to Build Canada. We're looking at projects that are viable and that are shovel ready within the next 12 months. We ourselves have one, and we do have a nonprofit housing provider that will be available too. In order to be looked at, you have to have at least one project that is ready to go within the next 12 months. We'll have two. So I think that'll put us in a good position to be considered. And then what we're proposing is letting Build Canada know about the other projects that might be ready within the next 5 years, and working with them how we could eventually get to that point. Are there dollars for that exploration program where you're working with an architect to find out what you can do with a site? There used to be seed funding available from CMHC. That no longer exists. So is that funding still available? Unlike previous CMHC programs where you had a formula that you could put in and it would give you an idea of what funding you might be available, that isn't here. They're basically saying, come to us, talk to us, let's make a deal, let's kind of figure out where we can go. So as for the counties, our participation, obviously we'll need to put some funding into that. What that looks like, I'm not sure at this point until we have some projects with a little bit more information that we can go forward and say, you know, here's what we can do, putting down 10% of the funding, 15, that kind of idea. That's kind of one of the ideas that we have moving forward. We will have funds from our Affordable Housing Fund available. There are limited funds through our COCHI, which is our Canada Ontario Community Housing Initiative, that from the province that we'll be able to provide, and any other funds that we might be able to find along the way. So just wanted to bring that information forward, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Are there any questions from council? Not seeing any. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hope, go ahead, please.
There we go. Thank you. Well, thank you. This is very exciting, and really appreciate the report. I'm just wondering, from a staff perspective, have you been speaking with the different CA? In our case, it's the CAO handling. We've got some opportunities on our back burner, and I'm sure other municipalities do as well. So just wondering where we are on that. Thank you.
So we have in the case of Town Blue Mountains, yes, we have been chatting with CAO, but we are looking at nonprofit housing providers also, because it is not only do we have to build it, but someone has to run it too. So that's sort of where we're looking. But yes, we're trying to explore any and all opportunities that we may have, keeping in mind that we will have limited funds to go towards those. But so we do have to be realistic about what is viable and where the funds are. But yes.
Very good. Any further questions? Okay, not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Next report is regarding the Ag Advisory Committee meeting minutes. I think Scott Taylor's going to take that one. It's the unenviable position of the agenda. But I know Scott will do a marvelous job, as he always does. So, I need a move. Sorry. He'll move. Councillor McQueen and Councillor McKay. Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Warden, and good afternoon to council. So I typed up some notes today, but maybe I'll just give you the abridged version given the time. But if anyone objects, I can go through the whole thing. Basically, the meeting started with an election of chair and vice chair, and pleased to announce that member Simon DeVore is our new chair, and member Gail Ardell is our vice chair. Following that, we went right into a presentation from Steve Duff, who is a chief economist with AMAFA. Highly encourage council to go back and look at this presentation if you haven't already. It's packed full of good statistics. Spoke about the fact that agricultural production has increased more than 57% since the year 2000, which is simply astonishing. Also talked about the fact that the agri-food industry contributes $51.4 billion to the GDP of the province, And more specific to Grey County, as of 2021, the county had 2,178 farms, which generated almost 560 million in farm cash receipts. So I know everyone around this table is well aware of how important agriculture is to Grey's economy, but this is just a really nice reminder and some really sharp statistics. He did note that the number of farms in Grey between 2016 and 2021 fell at a slightly faster rate than the provincial average, and we will get another update on this following the results of the 2026 census. So maybe at some point after the release of the 26 census, we have Mr. Duff back to speak to us. Talked about between 2021 and 2024, farmland values grew across the county by an average of 90%, sitting at close to 19,000 per acre, which is just slightly under the provincial average of 21,000 per acre. And he also noted that during that same time period, the rental rates of farmland only increased about 33% to about $200 an acre. Finally, he presented some information both on the future of agriculture as it relates to impacts from climate change and also strategies that might seek to better utilize underutilized farmland. And he talked about a project in the Peterborough area that tried to match rural landowners with farmers for greater lease uptake in that regard. Following that, I presented some information to the committee as a follow-up to the December meeting, which looked at energy projects and the potential for energy projects to have an impact on farmland. The province is projecting that we'll need to grow our energy generation by 75% by the year 2050. As such, we talked about both the provincial and municipal approvals that are needed for energy projects. And so when I talk about energy projects, think about things like ground-mounted solar arrays, wind turbines, battery energy storage systems, and various other projects that we might see scattered across our rural area. There are some guidelines in place which limit those uses on agricultural lands, particularly the size and scale of those uses, and also in some cases require the need for an agricultural impact assessment study. And finally, we also talked about the Independent Electricity System Operator, IESO's, intakes for more energy projects, and the role of both municipal support resolutions as part of those processes, as well as community benefit agreements. Next, we moved on to a report from Sarah Johnson, which was an update on the county's review of the forest management bylaw. The purpose of this report was to provide a summary of the feedback received. Council will recall we had those public meetings and open houses back in late April and early May of last year, and we've been steadily collecting comments since then. To no surprise, there was a wide array of comments, everything from questioning the county's jurisdiction to even have a bylaw, to more specific comments about the current bylaws, the timelines for processing permanent applications, alignment with the county's climate change action plan, and perhaps more pertinent to the role of the Agricultural Advisory Committee, the ability of farmers to be able to keep their farm fields clear of trees in that regard. With that, we talked about some of the other feedback we'd heard, and I'd say that by volume, the most feedback we heard was around a proposed restriction on limiting circumference limit harvesting. In response to the feedback we heard, staff are investigating options that wouldn't have an all-out prohibition on circumference limit harvesting, but maybe some further restrictions or guidelines in that regard. We also talked about some further changes that could be made to the bylaw with respect to some minor administrative matters, and also potentially adding a fee for permanent applications in that regard to help recoup some of the staff and Grey Sauble time needed to process those applications. Finally, we had a discussion about the detailed comments that we received from the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. So the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation staff have provided lots of comments to the county about the bylaw recognizing Saugeen's traditional territory. They also talked about rather than just environmentally significant areas, the notion of culturally significant areas. They recommended the removal of clear cutting from the bylaw, the potential for increasing fines, and incorporating traditional knowledge into silvicultural prescriptions in that regard. So staff are continuing to work with SON staff in that regard, and looking at what we might be able to incorporate into the bylaw, what might find its way, say, into other policy documents like a future official plan review, and what might be sort of outside of the scope of what we can do. So the hope is that we bring a final report and a final bylaw back to this table in late spring of 2026 for council's consideration in that regard. And then on a similar vein of updates, Sarah also presented a second report on an update to the beaver and coyote bylaw reviews. And she had presented an initial update to the Ag Advisory Committee in September of 2025 to outline some of the feedback received at that time. As council might recall, we heard comments both in support of and in opposition to the bylaws. Following that September 25 update, staff did a bunch of research into the comments received, and particularly some of the comments received around, are there non-lethal control methods that would better serve the county and the agricultural community in this regard with respect to nuisance animal control in that regard. So Sarah's report presented some of the research in that regard, and then got into some potential options that the county could consider going forward. For example, if the bylaws were to be updated and refreshed, are there further considerations we need to make around the fees paid to trappers? Those fees have stayed standard for many years now. So is there options to increase those fees? Is there also options for further refinement? So right now, if a municipality hires a trapper to trap beavers that are blocking their culverts, that trapper is paid by the municipality for their services, but then the trapper can also submit claims back to the county to be reimbursed based on the number of beaver tails collected. So maybe if we were to look at refinements to the bylaw, there could be exceptions for public lands such that the trappers are paid fairly for their services, but that they're not also reimbursed a second time from the county in that regard. So just some options that we could bring back to council at a later time for consideration. She also went through some options if the county were to not carry forward with the bylaws in that regard. Currently, the county budgets $15,000 per year for beavers and $15,000 per year for coyotes. And so if we were to rescind these bylaws and not replace them with anything, are there ways that we could spend those monies to A, increase education in this regard, and then B, also look at maybe some non-lethal control method grants? So maybe there's fencing or other abatement grants that could be offered to the farm community in that regard. On the education role and on some of the non-financial elements, we could also work with municipalities on changes to some of their dog bylaws, which might further assist the agricultural community in this regard. Sarah also stressed to the committee that the fact that the county has these bylaws, or if in some future world the county doesn't have these bylaws, the bylaws aren't a permission to trap or a permission to hunt. The bylaws are simply reimbursement for nuisance beavers and coyotes in that regard. So regardless of what the county does with its bylaws, municipalities and or landowners will still be able to hire trappers to complete the trapping in that regard. Whether the county moves forward or not is not permission. It's just compensation in that regard. And so the committee had a good discussion on this. There was lots of good feedback, including some members of the committee noted that, yes, there are these non-lethal control methods, but they do come at a great cost to farmers, and that's something to be considered. There was questions about some of the research that was presented and whether research from the states is also pertinent to a Grey County context. And there was folks around the table that noted the importance of these bylaws, both to farmers and trappers in that regard. We also heard other comments with respect to the fact that farmers are going to protect their livestock regardless of the county bylaws, and some are very proactive in that regard. Sarah noted that we take the feedback we heard from the Agricultural Advisory Committee and try to bring a further recommendation report to this council, perhaps in late spring or early summer of 26. And then I promise I'm almost done. Finally, we had a roundtable discussion, which is usually the most interesting part of these meetings. There was news about the recent Grey County Federation of Agriculture's public speaking contest, which had just recently run. There was the announcement of an event on April 7th by the Blue Mountain Agricultural Committee and the Chamber of Commerce in that regard. And finally, there was an update from our newest member to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, Emily McKeag, with respect to the recent intake for the Experimental Acres Program. And so that was in a nutshell what we talked about, but certainly if there are any questions, happy to answer those.
Thank you, Scott. Good report. Any questions? Councillor McQueen.
Very briefly, yes, good meeting, good speaker. Go back and watch the first part of that because there's a lot of good data there. A lot of good data. Two things. We had an OFA meeting last night. There was a lady down there, I think from the lower part of Wellington, who has sheep, who said all of a sudden the kill rate has increased down in the Wellington area, Wellington County. And secondly, I was talking to a farmer just last week and he has cattle and he was thinking that, said, well, maybe you should go to sheep because he's getting old and he can't, cattle are big. He said, yeah, but you know what happened to the sheep? I know you're handling us, so that was the response was like, yeah, you have more specifically, you have sheep. They're have more of a tendency to be wolf bait. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Councillor DeBreen.
Thank you. And through you, thank you, Scott. We hear through the Grey Federation, and of course, yes, there's a politicians meeting coming up. There will probably be questions about the predator and nuisance control, but energy projects. We hear all the time about the loss of agriculture, loss of acreage due to urban sprawl and development. But some of those energy projects, specifically battery storage facilities, remove acreage from farming or hinder to some degree, although they compensate the landowner a little bit better than farming. How do we find the balance between those energy, the need to increase our energy production by 75% and the need to protect or reduce more loss of agriculture?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Deputy Warden. Thank you for your questions, Councillor DeBreen, and happy to follow up with further information for council if you wish. I presented some information at the meeting with respect to both the policy framework. And so when I speak to the policy framework, the provincial planning statement 2024 did update a number of policies that would have have an impact on energy projects in the prime agricultural area. So one of those changes was to update the definition for an on-farm diversified use. So an on-farm diversified use, what council might be most familiar with is some of the agritourism experience or the on-farm shops that we see, particularly in the south of the county, whereby they're allowed on-farm, but they're very limited in size and scale. So it can't be the whole farm. So the province has incorporated energy generation and battery energy storage systems within that definition. So if a farmer wanted to have a very small solar array on their property, ground-mounted solar array on their property, or battery energy storage systems, there is an avenue where it might be considered on a small scale basis as an OFDU. There are provisions in the provincial planning statement which speak to the removal of land for non-agricultural uses. And so that's sort of a higher test to meet. And they need to go through a process to demonstrate that that they meet those tests, including doing an agricultural impact assessment. So that's the policy framework. But the other piece, and I'm just kind of scanning my notes here as I'm talking, is there's also sort of the intake process through IESO and what they'll actually issue contracts on. And so what they'll issue contracts on is a little different than say what the provincial planning statement says. And I'm just trying to find the sort of exact verbiage here, but there are controls to say that certain projects they won't be considering in the prime agricultural areas in that regard. And so, simply put, unless a farmer was just generating energy for their own needs, they wouldn't get a contract to sell back in that regard on prime ag lands. So are we going to see no projects in prime ag lands? No, but there are guardrails in place at the provincial level, both through the policy and through IESO as to protecting those agricultural lands and what could be permitted in that regard. And I apologize, I can't find the exact. So the province has also issued further direction through the recent procurement intakes on what will or won't be eligible. As part of the most recent one, no projects could be cited on specialty croplands. And they would also exclude ground mounted solar projects on prime ag lands. So no doubt this can change over time, but right now there are some of those sort of guide rails in place, if you will.
Thank you. Any further questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Greg, we have one item from consent agenda, number 6C, regarding Blue Water District School Board correspondence. Councillor Hope wishes to speak to that. I presume you will move to receive that? Or do you wish to do something different? Okay, propose your motion then, please.
Thank you. And thank you for placing this on the agenda. The motion that I would want to put forward, of course, is to receive, but secondly, for Grey County Council to provide its support to the Blue Water School Board. So if we could enshrine it, if the clerk wouldn't mind doing.
We can incorporate that into the motion. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor McKay? Good, Madam Clerk. Okay, any discussion? Councillor Hope?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm fairly new to this issue. I think there are others around the table who might have more depth, but basically I read with great concern in Collingwood today, and then of course the letter that that we're looking down the pipe of actually removing our what they call English trustees and leaving French and Catholic trustees in the school boards. And the plea here from, I would think a very well-written letter from the Blue Water School Board is we're actually even going to lose an Indigenous voice in losing our English, but our English trustees. Our English trustees or school board trustees predate councillors, municipalities. There's a lot of history there. So I find it very surprising. I'd be interested in what my colleagues around the table have to say about it, but I think that they make a very good case in terms of keeping the English or Anglophone is what we would have said before. But anyway, the English trustees and keeping our system, our democratic system of having a voice from the public to the public education system to continue to preserve it through maintaining that role. And I'm not even sure why this has come about. Maybe others around the table can do that. But I think it's very important for Grey County Council to support the Blue Water School Board in its endeavor to try to preserve the representation that we all value. Thank you.
Very good. Any discussion? Councillor DeBreen, please.
Thank you. And through you, I Southgate passed a resolution at its last council meeting in support of the Blue Water District School Board's plea to the Ombudsman and to the province. We understood it from the beginning that due to some outliers, we are being all school board are being painted with the same brush. Instead of addressing the concern or addressing I'll call it the bad behavior or the misuse of their role on the small number, they are looking to eliminate all school board trustees. We'll just wipe the slate clean. So I fully support of the resolution as we did in Southgate. And yeah, thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. Councillor Nielsen, please.
Sorry, thank you very much, Deputy Warden Milne. I think staff are just finishing crafting as to who the letter would be circulated to, and I would just look to the mover and seconder to make sure that they're okay with that, because that was kind of being crafted as you were calling the question.
Yeah, certainly I had suggested copy the local MPPs, but the letter would go to the local board as well. Is that agreeable to the mover and seconder?
Absolutely. And just thinking if we've got since Southgate has had some experience. So I think to all municipalities, then I guess that's all standard. Grey County municipalities, to our local MPPs, including Brian Saunderson, by the way, who's kind of in Simcoe. Yeah, in Simcoe. Yeah. Maybe Councillor McKay has some other ideas as the second. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just advised our common practice here is to circulate it to all the local municipalities and to AMO, who will advocate as well on our behalf. Councillor Nielsen.
Sorry, Deputy Warden Milne, I would just add the Minister of Education, Minister Concha, like if this is the conversation that's being started by the ministry, maybe sending it directly to them.
No, good point. Anything else? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. I don't believe we have any further business. Is there any notice of motion? Final motion is to adjourn. Councillor DeBreen, Councillor Greenfield, all those in favor? We are adjourned. There it is there.